In today's lesson, we're going to talk about how to graph in slope-intercept form. So previous until now, we have formally graphed the formula y equals mx. Remember that was proportional, and my graph always started at the origin, and then I followed my slope to get to my next point. Now today we're going to talk about slope-intercept form. In our exploration activity yesterday, we talked about the formula y equals mx plus b. So what is new to our equation? It's this plus b. And as you should have observed in my example, that b value shifted my line along this x-axis, this y-axis. It shifted it up and shifted it down depending on what that b value was. If my b value was -1, I ended up with a point at -1. If I had a b value of 2, I need to make sure that one of my points is on the y-axis at 2. But let's go ahead and look at some individual examples. I'm going to recommend that you graph these along with me. Okay, practice really is the best way to learn something. So let's go ahead and get started. My format is y equals mx plus b. Now, we are always going to see a number in front of x and a number where the b goes. M, or my slope, is always tied to the x. So m is always going to be right there next to the x. Even if I wrote a formula that said y equals 1 plus 2x, so notice it's just in reverse. That number next to x is still my slope. It's still my m. It's still my rise over my run. This number on its own stands for my y-intercept. And let's go ahead and practice this. So on our first graph, we want to graph the formula y equals 3x plus 1. Now, remember that we need a starting point in order to graph. Okay, so remember, slope does not equal a starting point. Okay, slope is just directions from one point to the next. Okay, so slope is directions from one point to the next. So if they're just like, well, how you walk 2 steps this way and 5 steps this way, okay, in order to get in my dots in all the right places, I need to know, well, where am I starting? So where is my starting point? My starting point is the number that is all by itself. So notice the number that is all by itself is this +1. So I'm going to go to my y-axis and I'm going to go starting at the origin up 1. So I'm going to plot a point at 1. Okay, that's what you should all be doing on your graphs right now. Now, what do I do from here? Okay, well, once I have a starting point, I can use my slope to get to the next point. So let's go ahead and use our slope. Remember, slopes need to be fractions. They need to be a rise over the run. So the very first thing I'm going to do is to convert my whole number into a fraction. Remember, whole numbers turn into the whole number over 1. Once I've determined my slope, I need to calculate my direction. So remember, the number on top tells me to rise. So since it's positive, I'm going to go up. And the one on bottom tells me to run. And since it's positive, I'm going to go to the right. So I'm going to go back to my graph and that y-intercept with that starting point that I graphed. Put my pencil on it, and I'm going to follow those directions to my next point. I'm going to rise 3, 1, 2, 3 spaces, and run 1, and make a new dot. And I can continue that pattern again. Rise 3, run 1, make a new dot. And just like that, I have my line of the slope y equals, of the equation y equals 3x plus 1. All right. So that's our first example. Let's go ahead and look at a different one. So this one says y equals -4x plus 5. So what am I going to do? Remember, number 1, we need our starting point. Remember, our starting point is not our slope. That's our slope next to x. We're always going to see that slope next to x. So I'm not starting with that. I'm going to start with a number that's by itself. And it's positive 5. So I'm going to go to my y-axis to positive 5. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to make a dot. That is my starting point. Now, what am I going to do from there? I'm going to convert my slope to a fraction. So negative 4 turns into negative 4 over 1. And then I'm going to find those directions. So what does negative 4 tell me to do? Remember, slope is the rise over the run. So I'm going to go down 4. And the one on bottom is positive, so I'm going to move to the right. Now, hopefully you've kind of noticed this pattern of we always go to the right. Yeah, we're always going to the right because the bottom is always positive. So let's count out our spaces. Remember, I'm going to start back at my starting point, not at the origin. My starting point is up here at 5, and I'm going to count down 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces and over 1 and make my dot. And I have 2 points. And I'm going to connect them to make my line. Awesome. Now, I want you to try this next one on your own. Okay, pause the video and press play when you are ready to check your answer. All right. Now, hopefully you notice that my y-intercept this time, and by y-intercept, I'm going to continue to refer to it's the number that's on its own. Remember, negative 2 is next to x. So negative 1 is my starting point. And I'm going to make sure I include the negative on there. Hopefully you included the negative, and instead of counting up 1 space, you counted down 1 space from the origin and made a dot. So if you haven't already, or your starting dot was in the wrong spot, make sure, let's erase and fix this. So negative 1, and then I'm going to take my slope and turn it into a fraction, negative 2 over 1. I'm going to remind myself negative 2 means I go down 2 on the top, and positive 1 means I'm going to go to the right 1. So going to my dot, counting down 2 spaces and to the right 1, connecting my dots, and I have my line. All right. Now, this next one's kind of a hard one when we see for the first time. It's not really hard to do, but it's harder because I know where I'm supposed to start. I'm supposed to start at positive 2, and I'm happy to put my dot there. But people always say, but Ms. Johnson, there's not a slope. There's no number in front of x. I don't know what to do. So here's my reminder. Remember, if there's no number in front of x, there's an imaginary 1. Otherwise, I wouldn't have an x right there. So I'm going to take 1. I'm going to convert it to a fraction. Remember, that's 1 over 1. Remember, the number on top tells me to go up or down, and since it's positive, I'm going up. The number on the bottom tells me to go right or left, and since it's positive, I'm going right. To graph this, I'm going to go back to my starting point. I'm going to rise 1 and run 1. Connect my 2 dots, draw my arrows, and I have my graph. All right, last example. So y equals negative 2x. Now, this is an example of something that you've seen before, and it's been a minute, so you might not remember, but remember, this is in the format y equals mx. This is proportional. And remember, when something is proportional, it goes through the point 0, 0. Okay, also notice there's not a number that's there by itself. So my starting point is at 0. So I'm going to go and put my dot at the center of my graph. And then I'm going to use my slope. So my slope is negative 2. So remember, convert it to a fraction, negative 2 over 1. Remember, slope is rise over run. So negative 2 means I'm going to rise or going down 2 and to the right 1. So down 2 to the right 1, and I've got my graph. All right, go ahead and start your assignment. If you have any questions, please reach out, and have a great